Welcome back. Now it's time to work on the logic of getting the data from an API service. And to do that, we need to create a file that's going to accomplish that. So I'm going to create here a new file. I'm going to click on this icon, new file, and then I'm going to create a file called functions.php. So this functions.php, this functions file is going to contain functions that will interact with the API service and get data from that API service. And we need to be very organized because the more organized you are, the simpler it's going to be. Because if you are organized, you will work on your project easily and you can maintain your project easily. And later, whenever you want to fix something in the project, it's going to be, trust me, it's going to be super simple. But on the other hand, if you don't follow best practices, things will be very complicated. So let me here start by opening up a PHP script. So I'm going to open a PHP script, and in that script, the first function that I'm going to create, here I'm going to create a function. The first function that I'm going to create is a function called initiate API. Initiate API. So this function is going to contain only a few things. It's going to contain the URL of the service that I'm going to interact with, as well as the basic code that I want in order to initiate a call to the service. So first we need to create a variable called URL. So URL, this variable will contain the URL, will store the URL of the API service. So this is very, very important. This URL is very important. And we will get the URL later. So this is the first step. The second step is to initiate the request. So in order to initiate the request, I'm gonna use the CURL library. So I'm gonna say here CURL underscore initiate init for initiate. So here CURL init, and this CURL init takes the URL. So we need to pass the URL to it. And you might be wondering, how can I pass the URL while it's empty? Don't worry about this, because later when I fill this URL when I pass or store the API URL to it, it's gonna work. And we need to store the result in a CURL variable, a variable called CURL. This variable is the most important variable because this variable will initiate the call to the server, and we can use it in order to do pretty much any and everything. So this is gonna start a CURL object or initiate the call. Initiate call. The third thing that we need to do is that we need to specify the options. So in order to do that, we need to use a function called CURL set opt. CURL underscore set opt. And this function takes two or three parameters. The first parameter is always going to be the CURL. The second parameter is the option that you want to have. So the option always starts with the CURL, and then opt, CURL opt, and then the option that you want. So as you can see, there are so many options you can select from, and you can change the value of these options. So in our case, we want to say CURL opt underscore URL. So we want, our case here, we want to pass the URL. So we need to set the CURL opt underscore URL to the URL, to this URL. This is the first thing or first option that we want to set. The second option is going to be, first we need to say CURL opt, and then as the first one, we need to pass the CURL. Then the second parameter, we need to use the CURL underscore opt underscore return transfer. Return transfer. This is going to return the value here. As you can see here, it gives you a good explanation. It says here value should be a boolean for the following values, and if you hover over this, it's going to give you the explanation of this. So if you set this to true, which I am going to set it to true, because if you set it to true, it's going to return the transfer as a string, and I want that. I want to return the response as a string, and then I'm going to convert that string into an array. So I'm going to set this return transfer to true. That way I'm going to get it as a string. And then we can set two other options, and these, by the way, these are optional. You don't have to do this, but I recommend doing this because you can use them later for other scripts if you want to display advanced errors. So I'm going to say curl opt underscore SSL verify SSL verify host, and then I'm going to set this to false. This is optional. And similarly, I'm going to say set opt curl and curl verify SSL first, and then verify peer. And for the verify peer, I'm going to say false. I don't want to verify the host or the peer. And this is for this function. So the first function is going to be the initiate API. This is going to contain this code, and it's going to contain the options that we want here. These are the options. I'm going to add here a comment. I'm going to say options. So this is going to make a get. What you need to know is that this is going to make a get request. So this is going to make a get request. And here what we need to do after all of this is that we need to make the request. Now it's time to make the request. So to make the request, we need to say curl execute, and then we need to pass the curl variable, this curl variable, and then I'm gonna store the variable in a new variable called result, because this curl execute is gonna return true or false. True in case of success, and false in case of error. So this is gonna make the request, or send the request, send request, or make request. And after we make the request, what we want to do, if you want to follow best practices, is that you need to close connection. This is very important. You need to close the connection. And to close the connection, you can call the curl underscore close and pass the curl object. This is going to close the connection. Many developers unfortunately don't use this or forget to use this, and it's considered one of the best practices. And if you don't use this, you are not following best practices, and it's unfortunate to do that. So you need to follow best practices if you want to become a professional developer. Lastly, we want to return the result. So we have two options. The first option is to convert the response further into any form of data we want, or we can return the result as is. We can return it like this, return result, and then outside this function, we can create another function that converts this to all sorts of data, any sort of data. We can convert it into an array or extract something from it, depending upon the structure of this data. And I'd recommend using this because this is going to return the data, the raw form of the data, and then you can do whatever you want with the data outside the function. I'd recommend doing this. So this is the most important function, which is initiating or making the request to the API service, and then it's going to return the result here. Finally, don't forget to click on File and then Save or Save All.